Welcome to the Big Top, Under Construction. If this is your first time, it's under construction because the media I'm talking about is something I haven't personally finished. Mostly because I like doing and watching too much stuff. Please leave your big spoilers at the entrance, and without further ado, let's start the show. Today in the spotlight is In Stars in Time, a turn-based RPG developed by Insert Disc 5 and published by Armor Game Studios. I have not finished this game, though I do believe I'm halfway through. In all honesty, it feels like a good thing to talk about a game I haven't finished because I can't spoil it for you and hopefully entice you to play. I recommend this game up and down. I saw this game advertised on TikTok as an upcoming cozy game, and when I heard the word time loop, I had my money ready on release day. I have a special place in my heart for specifically time loops. It's a trope that always gets my jaw to drop, like putting puzzle pieces together. I could do a month on time loop media I've consumed alone. In Stars in Time, you play as Siffrin, the more or less leader of a small adventure group. You're at the climax of the adventure, ready to face off against the evil king, the final boss, who is slowly freezing the country of Vanguard in time. Once you kill him and he's gone, life goes back to normal. You're traveling with Isabeau, I hope I said that right, a former guard, Mirabelle, a housemaiden from Dormont's House of Change, the main location of the game, Odile, a traveling researcher, and Bonnie, a kid who can cook. You are seen in the town of Dormont as the hero come to save the day. We know nothing about the heroes, but this is the story you were dropped into. You as the player quickly pick up on how close this party is from going on adventures you didn't see. They're warm and inviting to your character. You participate in an intimate dinner preparing for the fight in the castle, the last fight. Everyone talks about their hopes for after they win the battle. They're anxious, there's doubts they'll succeed, but the country's counting on them. You enter the castle, and as you pass through the first hallway, you're killed, crushed by a giant rock. The adventure is over, and the country is doomed, and none of the people on the outside know it yet. When Siffrin's eyes open, they're confused. They're fine. Their friends are fine. It's the day before again. You haven't gone into the castle. You get to try again and again and again, but Siffrin doesn't say a word, and no one else notices the loops. Siffrin is tasked with being the hero, even for the group. He is presented as mysterious but kind-hearted. If he gets the chance to make a pun, he's gonna take it, especially to cheer up or comfort a party member to his best ability. When it comes to emotional vulnerability, him and Odile have no idea how to handle it, unlike the party members they've come to befriend, especially Isabeau and Mirabelle, who are all emotional. Siffrin instead keeps his own intense emotions locked away in his own mind, which the player gets to experience. While not showing it outwardly, Siffrin's main concern slowly becomes taking out the king just to protect his friends and see them back to their normal lives free of grief. Grief is the main theme in this game, which starts with such a happy-go-lucky the hero can't lose attitude. It threw me for a loop. Two of our main characters are there not just for the country, but for people they personally know that were affected by this freezing curse. Bonnie's we don't see, but it is alluded to, and we get a lot of backstory on the heartbreaking reality of her sister being frozen in time. Bonnie, who's just a small kid, not even a playable character, she does some sideline support, but she's too young to fight. Bonnie's a spitfire, always ready to tussle with an outburst of anger. She's on a mission bigger than herself because she's presumably alone and frightened. All the family she mentions is her older sister, who can no longer joke with her or help care for her. In retrospect, Bonnie had to make the choice of joining a group of strangers to save her sister or stand by and wait. Bonnie's an interesting character because of her age. She states things the others most likely won't at first, such as the first fears of not succeeding, which Siffrin won't mention they haven't multiple times. Bonnie's also interesting because of her age and the way the other characters do try to dance around or hide things from her. But she always kind of knows. While Bonnie's grief is expressed through verbal flashbacks, Mirabelle's develops in front of us. We are in her home. We see the room she lives in and can hold her journal. She won't let us open it though. She talks about her memories of friends and events that happened as we explore. She talks about how happy she was. The king went for the House of Dormont first and took everything. Mirabelle isn't even sure how she got away, and survivor's guilt begins to plague her as the group travels deeper down the halls. that it should have been someone stronger who made it to return and beat the king. We watch Mirabelle realize her friends are frozen in time in fearful poses, their last thoughts possibly ones of panic and dread. She witnessed the crumbling of her life and is forced to relive it, to process people didn't make it out and are trapped in those walls until she comes through and saves them. At several points we see her cry, but there's one time Mirabelle snaps. She can't see any more of her friends and loved ones suffering and blames herself for not being stronger. Mirabelle, who for the most part is a mage and healer, starts trying to speed ahead and tear down the halls with a strength she doesn't quite possess. She fights, she's angry at her situation and breaks. Some warm food and a break eventually calms her down. She pushes on because she has no other choice. Handling time travel alone, Siffrin does not experience grief but anxiety and loneliness. When Siffrin fails, he beats himself up and becomes anxious. When you die the first time to a trap, Siffrin is beside himself. Finding traps was their job and they messed up. They didn't see it. Their friends died and it was his fault. The first run-in with the king, which is as far as I've played, does not go well. Siffrin dies and he knows his friends have died again, just as afraid, not knowing they would get to try again. They don't know. As far as I know, as far as I've played, they never get to know. There is one specific instance that has gotten my brain reeling. And actually the whole reason why I'm making this video is literally for this one line and to tell you to play this amazing game and to beat it. I have not beat it yet, but I am a slow game player. I literally cannot stop thinking about it and the implications it holds. I believe it's in the botany room. You walk past a table and for several loops you bump into your party. Siffrin comments on how it's a small squeeze in between the table and your party, who in traditional RPG fashion is falling behind you, and he has to walk through them to go back in that small space. Then, in one loop instance, Siffrin makes a remark in his head about how everyone avoided running into him. At some point after that, Isabeau and Siffrin are alone and Isabeau touches Sif's shoulder. He pulls his hand back and apologizes, saying he knows Sif doesn't like to be touched. Siffrin is confused. They're friends. He doesn't like to be touched, but they've shared a bed together at an inn. They've been fighting the king together and fighting off monsters. They've gotten close, except they haven't. When Siffrin loops back, all those memories are erased from everyone else. Their friendship is going back to where it was before entering the castle. There hadn't been joking around at bonfires while resting and sharing meals. There hasn't been moments of comforting each other or helping Mirabelle through her grief. Siffrin hasn't joked with Bonnie to help keep her mind off the what-ifs. They haven't experienced the heartfelt moments Sif has seen several times over. Siffrin now has a different bond deep down with his friends than they will probably ever have with him. He's still a quiet mystery that tells jokes sometimes, but he's experienced a lifetime with this group of people and they don't realize it. I will never get over the thought of Siffrin fighting tooth and nail for his friends who can't feel the same weight of their relationship simply because time does not move the same for them. The characters in this game are all very unique, having a roguelike character lead the party, a housemaiden who feels insecure in her abilities but is determined, a guard who resigned from his post to fulfill his duty to help people, and a scholar in search of knowledge traveling with the group to learn about the country. Oh, and we can't forget about Bonnie, the kid. The art style is charming, from the sprites to the actual portraits. Each character has their own clothing style, and you can tell they're from different regions of Vanguard and beyond. The sadness. The main enemies you fight also have an interesting look to them, ranging from humanoid to floating shapes. Our heroes let us know during our first sadness encounter that our enemies are actually the people who had fallen to the king, overcome by grief and sadness. They attack out of fear and confusion, unable to tell who's friend or foe, which again makes Mirabelle's grief all the worse because she is bound to know a few of the sadness in the castle. She can't catch a break if her friends and coworkers are attacking her. While we're talking about the enemies, let's talk combat. In Stars in Time has a battle system that's easy to pick up: rock, paper, scissors. Every battle starts with you identifying the sadness as it's holding its hand in a rock, paper, or scissors fashion, and you use the character who is strong against that element, for lack of a better term. Creating strategies was simple when the enemy was paper, because Siffrin was killer on the scissors, you use Siffrin. Mirabelle and Odile are able to use several elements, but specialize in one. The extra rock, paper, or scissors abilities are special abilities that can only be used every few turns. Bonnie, as I said before, isn't playable, but she will help in battle as the cook, restoring random bits of health or a finishing blow to enemies. She's kind of like a roulette system. While everyone gets new abilities throughout the story, Mirabelle gets the most important abilities, like unfreezing party members who get frozen in time by sadness who share the same ability as the king. Mirabelle also gets a special guard ability. Again, I'm still playing through the game. I'm at the point where I have to get that and unlock it. The game progression feels very natural, which is great for an RPG, at least for me. When I get stuck grinding, I personally get frustrated, and most of the time, that's when I start to peter off. Like, I'm there for the story. That's why I play these huge elaborate games like this. I'm not usually a combat person. I want to know what's going to happen next. In Stars in Time only had one part so far where I felt too weak to be where I should be, and that was moving from floor 2 to 3, that I found myself kind of grinding a little bit. It wasn't terrible, but I did notice it, and that's kind of when I started to peter off a little bit. The whole gimmick of In Stars in Time is that time loop, and it's done well. After the first scripted death, sometimes you'll continue to die for story beats and other times for puzzles. I've unlocked the wrong room with a special key that you only get one of, and you have to die. Yeah, you have to kill yourself, but you don't have to start over, which is also a really good idea. When Siffrin dies, you can choose which floor you'd like to go back to as long as you have like story keys, which I don't fully understand, but I haven't run out of, so you get them. You can start back on the same floor if you'd like to redo your mistake with new knowledge, which that's like my favorite part of time loops, is using new information you didn't have before. Your friends will question it at times, which I also like. Though you don't have to go back to the beginning of the castle, I found myself forgetting what I was supposed to do and starting on floor 1 to retrace my steps anyway. Revealing the biggest downside is sometimes the time loop can feel repetitive, but I put the game down for long periods of time, so it's probably just me. The game takes into account you'll be replaying sections, and there is a way to skip through dialogue you've read before, which I love, but it does warn you to be mindful because sometimes the dialogue can be different even if it's the same scene. So you could miss something new, so just like be careful. Other than a touch of repetitiveness, I've had a fun time so far with In Stars and Time. The story is sad and explores intense emotions that I really didn't think were gonna be in the game with how it started. But it's also really fun. I really like the story so far. The puns that Siffrin gives do tend to make me giggle. They're very much dad puns. I would recommend this game to anyone looking for an RPG that feels on the easier side. If you're there for the story, much like myself, I recommend investigating every inch of the castle. If for any dialogue, you can learn a lot about your party members through items reminding them of times before the world was still. Let me know in the comments who your favorite In Stars and Time character is, and maybe some of your favorite in-team interactions. Just please try to avoid big spoilers. I'm still dying to know what Isabeau wants to tell Siffrin. Side note, if you've watched my Delicious in Dungeon episode, if you haven't, you definitely should. But if you have, I'm caught up with the newest episodes and I'm freaking out. The comedic romp we've been going on got way darker than I thought, knowing nothing ahead of time of Delicious in Dungeon, and I'm kind of freaking out. So we'll see how long Netflix lets this first season go. And there might be a follow-up episode. I have a lot of feelings, but again, that's its own episode. Thank you for watching.